mégis síri rám az egész lélek. Irigyeim, hagyjatok szeretni, hagyjatok a szememet rávetni. Rászokott a szemem a nézésre, gyönger karom, s legény ölelése.
Once upon a time, many years ago, in a village in northern Hungary, an evil spirit abducted the lover of one of the village girls. When she pleaded for his release, the evil one told her she could have her lover back in exchange for an apron full of flowers. Since it was the middle of winter, the poor girl despaired. "Where can I find flowers in winter? In the snow." She prayed for help and was inspired with a plan. She embroidered her plain black apron full of flowers in the brilliant colors of summer. Then she went to the evil spirit, opened her apron, and there it was, an apron full of flowers. The evil one was outwitted. The lovers were reunited, and ever since, the people of Madzsar embroider their aprons with the most beautiful flower designs. You may or may not believe this story, but it certainly illustrates the importance of needlework in Hungarian culture. Hungary is located in the Carpathian Basin in Central Europe. The Hungarians, or Magyars, were nomads in Central Asia who came to this region 1,100 years ago. As historic Hungary became the much smaller present-day Hungary, many Hungarians found themselves living in Hungarian communities in neighboring countries. Others emigrated to different countries and continents throughout the world, taking with them their traditional embroidery patterns and their love of needlework. In this presentation, we would like to show you samples of the beauty and variety of Hungarian needlework, and to inspire you to explore further this living and evolving art form. According to Sister Edith Nemeth, director of the Penn View Art Center in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, professional artist and expert needleworker, embroidery was always the means through which women could brighten their lives and express their artistic talent and love of beauty.
A stitch in time is a joy forever. What is embroidery? It is being in touch with yourself, your heritage, all the riches of the past. It is reaching through the centuries into the very essence of the Hungarian people. This rich heritage is passed down from our ancestors, is still alive today. It is up to us to keep it alive, to make it flourish, to ensure that it will live forever.
We'd like to introduce you to two other ethnic artists, Elizabeth Madzsar and Clara Thurner, both from Cleveland. Like most ethnic artists, they are not professional artists. However, they are truly expert needleworkers who derive great joy and satisfaction from their art.
I am not an artist. I just learned to do this embroidery and all kind of a handwork from my mother and actually from my grandmother. I love to create something what looked nice, and sometimes I could change a little bit in it, but I still created something. I still do it and I still love it. And hopefully my granddaughter is going to do the same thing. She's interested in it, and she told me she would like to learn other things.
I actually love embroidery, but I would by no means say that I'm an artist. My mother taught us when we were 5 years old, and it was only after we came to the States and then we entered the Girl Scouts and we started embroidering different folk costumes, and that really set me off because it was something like then getting back to my roots.
Sister Edith also learned embroidery from her mother. She commemorated this later with a woodcut of her mother embroidering. Many of the pieces we will show in this video are the work of Sister Edith and her mother. We will now show you different styles of folk embroidery from various regions of Hungary. Sister Edith will begin with one of the oldest types of embroidery, Kelim embroidery.
The original Kelim style is 2,000 years old, not the piece, but the style. Every single color has a meaning, and every design has a meaning. For example, this is really where they lived, the tent, but it also could be the coat of arms. This person had 2 sons, sorry, but girls didn't count. So the 2 sons already went into their own tents, and this represents that. Heroic deeds such as animals or enemies they killed is recorded right here. Also the barns, and also the sheep and cattle, their livestock. The color had to be always with natural colors, because that is the only dyes they could get. This is later on, like 1,000 years later. It's no longer a geometrical style, and it has floral design. A touch of the geometrical is still in the end, as you can see, but sad to say there is no meaning anymore. The colors can also be more vibrant than the regular earth colors. Here we have the present Kelim. It also has geometric style without any meaning, but it kept its original beauty. This piece has 100,000 stitches, about 200 hours of work. This is an example of needle weaving. That means first you weave the material, and afterwards with needle and thread you are making the design in it. Short lines, tiny lines, long lines, short lines, tiny lines, and that becomes the pattern. It was very, very famous about 100 years ago all over Central Europe and also in Hungary. These 3 pieces are from northern Hungary. Appliqué technique. Herdsman coat decoration. First you have a felt piece, of course handmade felt piece. Afterwards you have a second color which you dye with vegetable dyes, and then you cut out the design with a very sharp scissors and actually sew it on it. If you are going to see the back, you cannot see the stitches, or hardly can see the stitches, because it's a good work. The next one, I'm just going to put it on the top of it. It becomes fancier, and here, if you focus on it, you can see that the stitches are already sewing machine stitches. The next one is over here, just on the top of it. You can see that more colors are coming in. This is an example of felt and then embroidery on it. It decorated the kitchen and the living room walls. A very beautiful example of stitchery and felt combination. An example of the modern version of felt embroidery.
Now this is an appliqué work. I just would like to show you how I used the same design and the same methods in a modern way. So everybody's favored the sweatshirt, embellished with the same design and the same method.
The art of cross-stitching. The first 3 examples are the very ancient techniques. The second one is the modern adaptation of the ancient technique. One of the finest examples of cross-stitch, about 100 years old. Please notice the very fine crochet edges. Another cross-stitch example. Most of the cross-stitches are made on white background with black and red thread. Sometimes, of course, the blue and black is also very nicely done. The most important part to remember is that you do not have really a pattern to put on the canvas itself. So you really need concentration to do it. You do have the pattern next to you. However, when you work, you do not have the pattern on the material. That is a very big difference between the regular embroidery or the cross stitch. Torockai embroidery is very famous. It is done in Transylvania. It can only be done in one color. It can only be dark blue, deep wine red, or white. Very seldom can you use light blue. This is an example of the light blue one. Each flower has a meaning. This is your sunflower, which stands for happiness. This is your thistle, which stands for sorrow. And this is called the stitch of destiny, right here. And the mother is doing this embroidery for her daughter, for the wedding. And with it, she's telling her daughter that your life from henceforth is going to be filled with happiness, the sunflower, and also sorrow, which is your thistles. And she always manages to put at least a few more happiness in than sorrows to appease her. But the stitch of destiny is tying the two together to show that not all happiness is happiness. There is always a little bit of a sorrow in it. And not all sorrow is sorrow, because there is always a little bit of a happiness in it. This is another example right here, a white on white. Now here, if you look at it carefully, you still have the sunflower for all the happiness, and you still have the thistle. But the thistle does not have a thorn, because this was done for a child, and the child is not ready for the sorrow. Also, there is no stitch of destiny, because the child is not grown up yet. And beside the sunflower and the thistle, there are also birds, as you can see right here. And of course, tulip, which is the state flower of Hungary. And of course, curlicues. These beautiful curved lines are always for happiness and for joy. An interesting fact is that they are not using buttons for the pillows. This is a pillow and no buttons. What they do is, after the embroidery is done, then they make holes. If you can see it, holes right here, and then they get the braided material, which of course they do themselves, and they just simply go back and forth, closing it. A very, very ancient technique again, before the buttons were invented. This is the most ancient Hungarian design. You have a vase over here, as you can see, and from this vase came all the most beautifully curled designs. The entire section of the patterns have to be covered. And the stitch is also very, very unique. Another example of calligraphical design from Transylvania, the very ancient technique. And you can also see here again the pillow, no buttons, but it is actually sewed together.
I'd like to show you the Kalotaszeg stitch. I guess you could call this the calligraphy stitch, and it's somewhat like a blanket stitch, but just a little more complicated in that you finish off both ends. And when it's all finished, it looks like the whole motif is all filled out, and you have different kinds of loops, and basically that's what it is. It's really just a closed off loop, and you keep working on it.
Needlework at the river Rába, which is Trans-Danube, which is very close to the Austrian border. You see the birds, the hearts, the flowers, and all the curly design in it. It is always done in one color, mostly dark blue and dark red. Sárközi motif is very, very special. Every motif is taken from nature. As you can see over here, this represents the tree of life, right here, and you also can see it right here, the tree of life. Everything comes from nature. The seeds, the trees, the eyes, the claws, the horns, the sun, star, hoof, everything, puddles, everything from nature. They put it all together into a beautiful design. So it is not just meaningless little sections, but it has a very, very deep meaning. As I mentioned before, the tree of life. The tree of life means our generation, our family, our country is going to live forever. The tiny little seeds in between, they are not just decorations, those are the seeds. The antlers of the deer. This is really the footsteps of different animals. This tiny little thing over here is a puddle. This is the eye of an animal or the sun, whichever you like. This type of embroidery is done always in one color, any color or on any color, but it must be one color. A very beautiful example of Sárköz is, again, this is done black on white. The most beautiful pieces are black and white. Here, the person used silk thread to make the design, to embroider the design. Buzsáki design is still another Transdanubian folk art. This is very, very delicate kind of an embroidering, as you can see from the needle and from the thread. The main color is red and blue. And of course, then you enhance the red and blue by black, yellow, and green. Every single motif within the motif is outlined in tiny little chain stitches. And every single section is really worked out actually doubly with an embroidery and surrounded by another kind of an embroidery. The motif is always geometrical, without meaning. It is just a beautiful play of colors, beautiful play of design executed with a very, very few stitches. A book cover right here and matching section to it, and then this is a work in progress. Needlework of the river Dráva, which is quite close to the Serbian border. Each section is worked out in two colors, mostly white and black, on an off-white material or ecru material. Most of the time you have a mirror image. That means the left side is exactly as the right side. And I have to tell you something special about this one. My mother was quite old. She was about 80 when she designed the first corner, this corner right here, and challenged me to do the second part. So this is my mom's work, and this is my work on the other side. Kun embroidery is one of the most ancient type of embroidery. This is from a very special sheep. The wool from the sheep is used to make the yarn. And with the yarn, of course, you are doing the embroidery. You only have these 4 colors. They do not like any other colors, because these 4 colors they can do right from the food and the vegetables which is around them. It is always floral motif, and most of the time it is a tulip. The tulip is very important, and of course the ancient star. Matyó is a region, northern Hungary. The Matyó is one of the most known embroidery form of Hungary. It started about 300 years ago. It had a very humble start, colored material, white motif, very humble. Then it became on black material, a little bit more additional flowers, but still in one color. Now we skip about a few decades, and it becomes very, very filled up, as you can see. That you cannot see the material, the black material. Everything is completely covered up. And if we realize that it came from here within a few decades, and you can really see how it grew and developed and really flourished. Please notice the macrame ending, which is an addition beauty to the piece.
Now this is a boy's Matyó shirt. And when a young man becomes of age, he would get this shirt. Each year in the village, they change the design. So if you're knowledgeable, you can tell actually how old a young man is by deducting the years from the present when that design was utilized.
A modern way of doing Matyó is right here. The colors are tamed. The flowers you see over here are roses. These are all roses. And of course, roses are always a symbol of love. And of course, if you are doing this type of a work for somebody whom you really love, you put more roses in it. And then if you really love that one person, you fill it up with roses. So it is a subtle way of communicating with the other person. Kalotaszeg design also have a humble origin. It was first done with very small flowers such as this, you can see. But the interesting fact is that all of the Kalotaszeg embroidery has fancy edges, unlike the other type of embroidery. But very simple, just a little bit of a flower, white on white, very, very simple. Then, as you can see, the colors are getting to be more exuberant. And notice the edges, very fancy edges. That is a characteristic of a very old Kalotaszeg design. Then here you can see tiny little holes coming in. And as you can see, the holes are getting more and more pronounced and more pronounced until you are doing this. The entire section of the white material is cut out and it becomes a lace. You still have the beautiful colored flowers in between, but you cannot even see the material. From those two few little dots, look what evolved within a decade or so. Now the colors disappear, and we are seeing a very beautiful piece here of Kalotaszeg, all white on white. A so-called modern Kalotaszeg at its best. Swirling, beautiful flowers, oval design, done by hand. Kalotaszeg represents the happy people of the prairie land. You can just see the beautiful meadows of Hungary full of flowers. The flowers always represent a virtue. And the women, the young girls, are the ones who are embroidering it for their trousseau. Remember, every young girl has to have a trousseau completed. Trousseau means really a trunk, and that trunk has to be completed with all kinds of work, embroidery work, and fine linens, so that she is going to be worthy to get married. So these are really, it's really a love story. The roses, as you can see over here, are always for love. Then, of course, you have the hot pepper. The hot pepper is always for virility, or strength, endurance. Then you have the smaller virtues, just as humility right here. The daisies are right here, which is always for simplicity. Then you have a wheat, which is for good harvest. The harvest was extremely important for the farm people. When they have harvest, they know they have a future. They have food. Now, this type of embroidery went away from the previous pieces. It does not have a lace at the end. It does not have a lace as part of the design. So there are two roads leading in Kalotaszeg. One is the exuberant flower, and the other one is making it into the lace.
So far, we have described the different types of folk embroidery of Hungary. Now, we'd like to show you some embroidery styles which originated with the nobility and the middle class. Some of these styles are very old and made use of both Eastern and Western influences to develop a distinctly Hungarian character. Their motifs can often be found in present-day folk embroideries. Other, more modern styles were developed in the 19th and 20th centuries, often by industrial artists.
This is the same as stitch of the Hungarian cavalry, the hussars. It is mostly done on red material with black. The chain stitch is done in one complete flow. As you can see, the loops. It's just going on and on and on, all those loops, forming a beautiful design. And if you look at the picture over here, you can see the cavalry stitch right here and also on the mantle of the hussar.
The Hungarian gala dress, worn by men, was quite similar in style to the hussar uniform, while that of the ladies was often decorated with costly gold, silver, and silk embroidery, done in the style known as noble ladies' embroidery. Elizabeth will show you a contemporary adaptation of a lady's gala dress, the díszmagyar.
Well, this is a dress what I made for my youngest daughter, and that's a cord dress, and the embroidery on it is called the passing. Originally, in the 16th, 17th century, they used real gold or real silver. And since they couldn't go through the material, they carried the thread on the top and stitched it down with very fine silk thread. That's why it's called passing. The headpiece, which goes with it, and the headpiece, it's interesting because only the girls would use something like that. I can put it on my granddaughter's head. When somebody got married, they had to cover the top of their head. So actually that's the piece what the bridal headpiece originated from, because the bride less time could wear something which was open in the top. When you do that stitch, originally you draw your pattern on the white material, what you based to the velvet, and you based the outline of the pattern through the velvet, and then you fill in the basting stitches. Now this is a dress what I made with the same design, and this way it has a completely different look to it.
A truly traditional piece called needle drawing. The explanation is very simple. First you draw the design onto the material, and then you embroider it with thread, the fine line you have drawn. This type of a very old-fashioned piece is really put on the wall to protect the wall, since you can wash it out every single day. Needle painting is, very simply, painting with your needle. You can make one flower using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different colors, but if you wish, you can go with 32 colors for one single flower. Here you have a very simple example of needle painting. A contemporary example of needle painting. Each flower has at least 2 colors. And these are the typical Hungarian flowers of the prairie.
Okay, now I want to show you a piece that actually is based on head-end porcelain. The designs that you see here are reflected in this nondescript item right now, but what it is when I pull this cord is really a bun warmer, and you can see the designs in the various corners.
In order to pass a design on, they made little samples out of it. And many times when, for instance, somebody got married, they asked for some samples from embroidery. And they were sent and loaned. And these samples are from my aunt, and they were done in 1926. Actually, she learned it in school, and she had to make the samples in school. Well, these old samples can be used in a modern way. I got them framed, and I'm going to give it to my daughter as a birthday present.
Lace was very important in the Middle Ages and even after. Every single young girl has to prove herself that she can make laces before she got married. So in order to prove it, she had to make, and watch this, she had to make this many types of laces. Every single section is another type. Here you have about 150 different patterns in this. After she has completed this so-called sampler and proved herself that she can make laces, then she was eligible to marry the young man. Of course, the townsgirls were rivaling who is going to make the longest line. So some of the lines were really, truly very, very long. There we are, ready to get married. Here I have some very ancient laces, and about this lace right here, this was equivalent to gold. What I mean is, you made this lace, not the silk, but just the lace itself, and then you put it on the scale. And one side of the scale has the gold powder or the small gold rod, and this other side was the lace. So it was equivalent to the gold.
Hungarian women made beautiful bobbin or pillow lace, crocheted lace, netting or filet lace, and all kinds of open work embroidery. They were also experts in combining these different techniques into beautiful works of art. We'd like to show you 2 distinctly Hungarian examples of this art form.
Hövej is a little town next to Austria. The people of Hövej are making this kind of a lace, which is the most exquisite design. If you can zero into any one of this different kind of a pattern, almost like a Pennsylvania Dutch hex sign, every single one of them have a meaning. It's incredible how they can really put all those designs together. It is always white on white, and it's always done with an open work, as I pointed out here, or in any of the other sections. Even the ends are cut out. Even the embroidery part, as you can see over here, has a meaning. Oak leaf is always, oak and oak leaf, is always for long life. It is not a famous lace, but it's a very, very uniquely different lace. Here they made flowers, for example, and every single flower has a different design in it. If you ever have seen an exquisite design, well, here it is. The famous Halási csipke, or the lace of Halas. This type of lace won the grand prize over all the laces of international exhibit in Europe in 1937. The way to do is, first of all, you draw the design on a sheet of paper, then with a heavier thread, you outline the drawn design, and you baste the white thread onto the design. After that, all you have to do is fill it in. Can you imagine that? I mean, to fill all these tiny little holes in with such a fine, incredibly delicate way of design. They have about 16 ways of doing it, 16 different techniques, and all those are used in order to fill it in. Even this part right over here, this is not the material. It was woven in by hand, individually. A piece like that takes at least 30, 40 hours after you have mastered how to do it.
Many centuries have gone by since the first nomad women hung Kelim embroidery on the walls of their tents. But Hungarian women around the world still pursue embroidery as a favorite hobby. They still use the traditional techniques and patterns learned from their mothers to beautify their homes, as they pass on these skills to their daughters. In this way, they feel connected to the past and in touch with their heritage.
As history developed, each nation became distinct in its own culture. This uniqueness, this inner difference, is expressed in folk art. Art, folk art, is the expression of the soul, a soul filled with beauty, eloquence, love, as it touches the tool, in this case, the embroidery needle. The most essential element of needlework is time. Time, sensitivity to nature, love of heritage, patient work will result in endless joy, a deep satisfaction from within. Yes, a stitch in time is a joy forever.